Hello and welcome back. Today I'm going to be going over the writing section of the SAT, in which I'm going to be walking you through my thought process on how I answer these questions, in which I'm going to be going into a step-by-step explanation on how I get to each answer. Now before we start the video, you should read the passage in front of you here so you understand what the passage is about. So pause the video, read the passage, and once you're done, you can unpause the video and we'll get into answering the questions. Now that you're done reading the passage, let's get into answering the questions. Well, how do we answer these questions? You can see here that the symbol 1 indicates that question 1 references that portion of the passage. So when we have question 1 over here, we have the first symbol over here. So we're going to be answering a question that's around this area. Well, let's start. At this point, the writer wants to add another example to support the claim made in the first sentence of the paragraph. So let's see what the first sentence is. If you were to travel all over the world, you might notice that each of the world's most famous cities is characterized by a certain look. And we see that Tokyo has neon billboards and colorful signs, and Paris has the Eiffel Tower. So let's go through these options and see which one fits the theme of the passage. So let's see here. The first one, Tokyo was almost entirely rebuilt after World War II. Well, we already see that we're referencing the neon billboards and colorful signs, so we wouldn't really want to add another example like that. Besides, that tone doesn't really fit the rest of the passage. So, cross that out. Next, Hong Kong, like Tokyo, is a major international financial center. While that may be true, that doesn't fit with the theme of the passage. We're offering a descriptive language here. Neon billboards, colorful signs, fanning out from the base. An international financial center doesn't achieve that. But let's look at the next option. Dubai features glittering skyscrapers rising out of the desert. We're describing the glittering skyscrapers, which helps the reader imagine what's happening. So, we're picking option C. On to question 2. This area has been inhabited for thousands of years. Therefore, its current look is a relatively recent development. Now, before you do this, just try say the sentence out loud in your head and try find any issues. Well, let's hear. The issue's right here, therefore. This area has been inhabited for thousands of years, and we're saying therefore its current look is a relatively recent development. So we're saying people have lived here for so long, and that's the reason it's a recent development. That doesn't make much sense, so let's cross that out. But our next option, however, this area has been inhabited for thousands of years. However, its current look is a relatively recent development. However means when something's unusual. People have lived here for thousands of years, but the current look we know today is a relatively recent development. That's why option B fits. Let's go on to the next question. Question 3. Visiting Paris 200 years ago, the city would have looked very different. Well, let's pick which one fits the best. Nothing's wrong with the first option, so we'll save that for now. Next, Paris would have looked very different. Now the reason we don't want to do this is because we're already describing Paris over here. Visiting Paris. Well, do we really want to say the word Paris again? No, we don't. So let's cross that out. Next, the difference in the city would be seen. Well, that's not really the wording we're going for here. The difference in the city would be seen. We have a much better way to say that, so let's cross that out. We now have come down to two options. You would have seen a very different city, and the one here, the city would have looked very different. Well, if we look back to the start of the passage, we're referencing the reader. If you were to travel all over the world, you might notice that each of the world's most famous cities, etc. So here, we're going to be referencing the reader. You would have seen a very different city. Well, on to question 4. Paris's transformation was largely the work of one man, Georges Eugene Haussmann. Well, how do we introduce him? Well, there's nothing wrong for now, but let's look at the other options. One man, semicolon, Georges Eugene Haussmann. We use semicolons when joining two sentences. So let's see that. This would be one sentence. Paris's transformation was largely the work of one man. That is a sentence. But the next one, Georges Eugene Haussmann, whose official title was Prefect of the Seine Department, that doesn't really make much sense as a sentence on its own. So we're going to be crossing this out for now, unfortunately. Next up we have one man, Georges Eugene Haussmann, and we have a semicolon at the end of that. When we do that, we're saying, whose official title was this. Now that's not a sentence on its own, so we're going to be crossing that out as well. Next we have these two final options. One man, George Eugene Haussmann. Now that seems we can add some breaks in there, right? That's why we're going to be using this comma and a colon, because we're introducing this person, adding the break, and then describing what his title was. So the correct answer is no change. Let me remove this highlight. On to question 5. At the time, the city was divided into many small cramped neighborhoods that was disconnected from one another. Now again, that agreement doesn't really make any sense with the tenses. Now read the sentence aloud in your head and see what makes sense to you. Let's read this again with is. At the time, the city was divided into many small cramped neighborhoods that is disconnected from one another. If this was present tense, that would make much more sense, but this is about the past. So let's go on more. Cramped neighborhoods that has been disconnected. That doesn't really fit over here, but let's look at the last option. At the time, the city was divided into many small cramped neighborhoods that were disconnected from one another. Previously, they were disconnected, but after the work of this man, they were not. So, we're going to be using were as our option. Now on to question 6. Now this is a bit unusual. So do you see these little brackets over here with the numbers? Well, that's what question 6 is about. So when we have the 1 over here, this 1 is referencing this sentence all the way over here. This is what we call sentence 1. This would be sentence 2, sentence 3, and you get it. So we have sentence 5, where is sentence? Here. This is sentence 5. And it doesn't really fit right here, or else that's what it thinks. It's saying that we should move the sentence 5 or keep it where it is now. Well, what's sentence 5? The aims of Napoleon's reform were twofold: to make Paris more aesthetically pleasing and to make it more functional. Well, we're talking about what Napoleon's reforms were, and if you read the passage, we could come back here. He was appointed to recreate Paris by Napoleon III, who had declared himself Emperor of France in 1851 and wanted to cement his legacy by creating a modern capital. Well, we're talking about what Napoleon wanted, so this sentence would make way more sense if we put it right after we introduce Napoleon. So we can see what is this sentence? Sentence number 2. So we're going to put sentence 5 after sentence number 2. Let's go on with the passage. Question number 7. Which choice most effectively combines the underlined sentences? So question number 7 is here, and we have, to address these problems, Haussmann installed several wide boulevards. These have opened up the city. Well, let's look at our options. Boulevards in that that lengthens the sentence actually. But let's look at this next one. Boulevards which. To address these problems, Haussmann installed several wide boulevards, which both opened up the city visually and made it easier to get from place to place. This option is the shortest out of all of these, and it makes the most sense, which is why it most effectively combines the sentences. On to question 8. We're making good progress here. Question 8, we have to deal with this word. And to deal with this word, let's actually look at the rest of the passage. Not the passage, the paragraph. Other changes that Haussmann made to the city included the addition of more green space in the form of both large and small public parks, and this is the word we're dealing with, and then the modification of the city borders. Can you notice something about these verbs? The addition, the modification. We want to change this word to match the style of the sentence. So the construction would be saying the construction would make the most sense. Saying the constructing of or to construct. That wouldn't match the same tone as everything else here. Next up, we have question 9. And we're trying to simplify the words here. Consequently, Paris's population quadrupled in number of people by a factor of 4. Now, do you see an issue here? Quadrupled by itself already means to increase by a factor of 4. So this is redundant by saying to increase by a factor of 4. So this is obviously not an option. Now option B is already doing the same thing. So we're going to be crossing this out. Now the reason we're not going to be using this is, even though it doesn't include the word quadrupled, this is just the definition of quadrupled. So we can just do this. Now we could say increased in group, but that's not specific enough. It could have increased by one person, it could have increased by 100 million people. But when we said quadrupled, we're being a bit more precise. We're showing the impact of the work of Haussmann. Now on to question number 10. Now let's read the passage before it. Not surprisingly, Haussmann did face criticism from both politicians and Parisian citizens. The projects cost millions of francs, frustrated city leaders, and the sweeping visual of changes Haussmann instituted left many residents feeling their beloved city was unrecognizable. Well, he's illustrating some complaints over here. Let's look at the past sentence. he faced criticism from politicians and the citizens. So should we keep this or delete it? Well, I think we should keep it because we're showing the complaints of the citizens, which is what supports the sentences. So I know I don't want to delete it, but I have to keep it for a reason. So why should I keep it? Let's look at option B, because it provides information that supports the claim in the previous paragraph. Well, the previous paragraph was talking about helping the city, so this doesn't really support the claim, so we're going to cross this out. But it provides information that supports the previous sentences. Yes, we're showing the criticism that he faced, and this supports the criticism, so this is the correct answer. Now to the final sentence. Let's hear. Haussmann's ideals, however, went on to become influential in the City Beautiful urban planning movement in the United States. Cities like Chicago, Denver, and Washington, D.C. all owe a debt to Haussmann. And we're putting a comma over here. But should we really do that? Let's look at our option choices. So right now, I don't really feel like we should do this, but let's leave it there. Washington, D.C. all owe a debt to Haussmann. Again, I also think we should do that, but let's just keep these two here. Washington, D.C., comma, all owe a debt, comma. We're adding too many unnecessary breaks in that sentence, so I'm crossing that out. And last one, Washington, D.C., semicolon, all owe a debt. When you do a semicolon over here, we're breaking it into two sentences. We're suggesting that all owe a debt to Haussmann is a sentence, and the sentence previously is also a sentence. When you break it up like this, it doesn't make much sense. So we're going to cross this out. And now we have two options left. To add a comma right before to Haussmann, or to have no change. To remove the comma here or to keep it. Now we already added a comma, comma, and comma. We have enough breaks in this sentence. So I believe we do not need any more breaks in this sentence, which helps keep the sentence concise and, well, easier to read for the reader. Now that we've done that, let's submit our answers. And would you look at that? We got them all correct. Well, thank you for watching, and if you have any questions or need advice, please let me know in the comment section down below, and goodbye.